Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Jen, and I haven't uploaded on this channel in a while. So if you're new, welcome, and let's just pretend I've been here all along. If you're not new, yeah, sorry about that. I have another channel, which is kind of like my main channel, where I upload all kinds of like mom content, day in the life stuff, homeschooling things. And that's sort of where I focus a little bit more. And as much as I love the idea of having a book channel, because ever since I got back into reading, which was right around quarantine, I would say like 90% of the YouTube videos that I consume are book related channels. And so this is something that I've been wanting to do for a while. I've kept reading, like the reading has continued, just the filming has been a whole other story. But I'm gonna try this year a little bit more to stay on the ball and, you know, make it a little more of a regular thing that I'm uploading on this channel. Anyway, so for my first video of 2024, I thought I would just do a recap of everything that I read in December. You know, as we all know, December is always like a super busy month because of the holidays and stuff. I feel like for me, because we have a large family, a lot of kids, 6 kids, and so, you know, like prepping for the holidays is like a full-time job in itself. At the same time, I felt quite organized this past December, and I felt a little bit ahead of the game. So once we took our break from homeschool, I actually felt like I had some downtime to fit in some reading, because some Decembers I barely read anything at all. So for December, I read, let me see, I think 9 books. If you count mangas, which I do, 9 books. I have some of them here, like physical copies. A few were audiobooks and digital, like from the library, like from the Libby app or whatever. So I'm gonna go over everything that I read and probably put my rating up here on the screen, because for a lot of them I don't quite remember what I actually rated them. And I'm basically just going to talk about them from like in order of how I read them. So the first book that I read that I actually don't have a copy of, I listened to it on audiobook, is a Christmas book, because I really did want to, like, I was trying to get in as many holiday books as I could this December. I read It Happened One Christmas by Chantel Gurtin, I think is how you say it. So I listened to that on audiobook, and it was cute. Honestly, I don't really remember too much. I mean, I remember the general synopsis of the story. I don't really remember too much of the details, so I would say it's not something that was like phenomenal, but it was like a typical cute Christmassy romance. It was a little bit insta-lovey. Like, I kind of felt like the storyline, in terms of like the guy and the girl meeting and the, you know, how quickly the love happened, that was like really fast, and yet there were parts of the story that sort of dragged on that I feel like could have just been left out. And it wasn't a very long book, but it could have been even shorter than what it was, honestly. Basically, you have this girl, she writes scripts for like these Hallmark type movies, and so she needs to get a permit to film in this very specific Canadian town that she wants to film the movie in, and it's just a few days before Christmas, and the mayor, is he the mayor? I think he's the mayor, is very against her filming in his town, does not want to agree to giving her this filming permit. It's a little bit of like enemies to lovers type of thing, and so on and so on. It was okay. It's not like my most favorite like holiday read I've ever read, but it kind of set the scene for getting into the Christmas, you know, the whole Christmas mood. So it was enjoyable enough, but also a little bit forgettable. Then after that, I kind of swerved in a different direction, and I decided to pick up Check and Mate by Ali Hazelwood. And actually, this is the very first Ali Hazelwood book that I have read. I know she has, and this is actually a young adult book. I know she has a whole bunch of other books. I do have Love Theoretically here on my shelf, but I just picked that up recently, so I haven't even read it yet. This is the first Ali Hazelwood book that I picked up. I actually really enjoyed it. So I'll tell you the things I really enjoyed about it. I actually was into chess for a while, and I know enough about it that all the chess talk didn't really bother me all that much. Honestly, I know I've heard some people talk about that, like, that was the part that they didn't like whenever, like, they were actually talking about chess because they didn't know anything about chess. I don't know if you really need to know a whole lot about it for the book to still be enjoyable. Obviously, if you understand it a little bit more, then maybe it's going to be a little more interesting. But all in all, I would say that you can still read this book and find it interesting without being into chess. The other thing I enjoyed about this book was because of the fact that it was young adult, there was very like little to no spice in it at all, which is like, I'm just not so much for that in books in general. I tend to just skip over that. So that's kind of like the pro to reading something that is young adult, that you're typically not really going to get a lot of that at all. The premise of the story basically is that you have this girl and she used to play chess. She was very, very good. And then she, for whatever reason, just kind of stopped playing. Also, they're younger characters. So I think, is he already in his 20s? I don't remember now. He's either really late teens or in his 20s. And she is just out of high school. They're about that age. She was kind of like a prodigy, I guess, chess player. And then at some point she stopped playing and you kind of don't know the whole reason why. It kind of alludes to a situation with her dad. You don't quite know what is going on at the time. The guy, the love interest, I don't remember anybody's name. Oh, Mallory and Nolan, sorry. He is the current, I guess, like reigning chess champion. Throughout the book, she basically gets thrown back into this world of playing chess because she's trying to help support her family in any way that she can. And it's not really enemies to lovers. I would say it's more like rivals. I thought it was cute. It's a very easy read. The only other thing that I just didn't really, just unnecessary, is she has younger sisters and she has kind of a tumultuous relationship with them. It's constantly brought up that at her house, no topics are off limits and that they're very open about everything. And her parents were always very open about talking about, you know, whatever. So because of that, her sisters are very like unfiltered in how they speak, which is fine, except for the fact that I just feel like it was like overkill for no reason. Some of the things were a little bit like out of left field, almost like for shock value, I guess. And considering the ages they're supposed to be, still felt a little bit like inappropriate. And maybe that's just me being a mom and all that. But it was more just like it was there to be there, but really added nothing to the story. And I don't feel like it had to be included. Anyway, aside from that, it was a cute read. I did enjoy it, and I'm actually looking forward to picking up another, probably it will be love theoretically, because I did enjoy the writing quite a bit. Jumping back into another Christmas read, I picked up The Holiday Swap by Maggie Knox. I know this has been out for a while. I've heard a lot of people talk about it, like always around Christmas time. I hear people talk about this book. I've had it on my shelf actually for a couple of years, and I finally decided to pick it up this year. So basically you have these two sisters that are twins, and they live in opposite states. One of them is the co-host of like a baking show, and then the other one has taken over the family business. They own a bakery. They decide to swap lives the week leading up to Christmas, and of course chaos ensues. They both find potential love interests in the other person's location. Virtually nobody around them knows that they have switched places, so it's like mistaken identity, all of that. I thought it was really cute though. I really enjoyed it. While reading it, it felt like watching, maybe not a Hallmark movie, but rom-com holiday movie. Yeah, I thought it was like, I actually really enjoyed it. It was the kind of thing where I was like, okay, I'm just gonna take it for what it's worth. And probably one of my most favorite holiday reads that I've read to date. So yeah, that was a really good one. Moving on to some manga. I don't read a lot of manga in general. I have found a couple of series that I like and I kind of just stick to those, but I do like to throw a manga in every once in a while as like a palate cleanser and just something like short and sweet to read in between, especially if I'm reading something a little bit longer or if I'm in the middle of like a book series. I had a few Spy Family volumes to get through that I had just sitting here that I had not read yet. So I actually read, I'm pretty sure I read one after the other consecutively, Spy Family Volume 4 and Spy Family Volume 5. And if you don't know about Spy Family, it is a very cheeky manga, you have this spy and he's basically assembled himself a fake family for the sake of a mission that he is on. And they all have abilities. It's him, his wife, and his daughter. They all have abilities that neither of them know about. So, you know, every volume just kind of goes into a little bit more of the main mission, as well as like some side little missions as well that happen. You are introduced to some new characters. Also a dog enters the mix. And I don't know, like, if I was going to suggest, if you wanted to dip your toe into manga, I would definitely say try Spy Family. I love every single volume. It is actually funny and so quick of a read. So I always give these 5 stars. All right. And then after that, I listened to another audiobook. It was I guess a reread. I decided to get back into Hunger Games. The last time I read the Hunger Games, I was not married with kids, okay? Let's just say that. I guess with like the new movie coming out, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I sort of just got inspired to reread the series, and I just wanted to see if I enjoyed it as much as I did when I was younger. I thought listening to it on audiobook would be kind of cool, and you know, I was like doing my puzzles and taking walks and things like that, and I'm happy to say I really, really enjoyed it. If you've already read The Hunger Games, or even if you haven't, it is so fast-paced. I know some people, I mean, I only read the first, well, years ago I read the whole thing, but as far as my reread goes, I only read the first book. As in any series or trilogy, whatever, people always have their favorite book in the series. Even though I've only gotten through the first one in terms of jogging my memory as to everything, all the details in the book and the pacing of it and everything like that, I would say in general that entire series like really hooks you from the very start, and I remember thoroughly enjoying the entire series. Now, even though I've only gone and reread the first one, I have now decided that I want to watch all the movies, and actually they are leaving Netflix like at the end of the month, at the end of January. Originally, my plan was like, oh, I'll read the book and then I'll watch the movie. And I've already watched the movies before too, so none of this is like spoiler for me. It's more just I'm like revisiting, you know. But I was like, oh yeah, I'll wait and I'll just like watch each one as I'm done reading the book. But like I said, it's leaving in January. Now, could I probably find it somewhere else? Of course I could. Could I buy the movies? Of course I could. But instead, I am now just inclined to just watch all the movies. So I've been binging all the movies, even though I haven't got past the first book. I'm assuming if you're watching this and you read books, you've heard at least of the Hunger Games. But even as someone who is like older, a little bit older, I would say if you haven't read it already, or even if you did and it was like a long time ago, you're looking for some good dystopian. I think nothing beats the Hunger Games. I would say it's just as good now as it was the first time I read it. And the audiobook was really good too. So then I jumped back into Spy Family. Is this the last? No, I actually have, this is book 6. I have still book 7 on my shelf. I have one more to read myself, catching up with what I have on my own shelf. But I picked up book 6. Again, what can I say? It's harder with a series and a manga because obviously as you get along, you know, and the plot progresses, you don't want to give anything away. I don't even want to really give characters away. Rest assured, this one was just as good as all the other volumes. And again, I highly recommend this series. And then the last 2 books that I have. So this first one, I also listened to on audiobook, and it is called The Last List of Mabel Beaumont, and it's by Laura Pearson. I don't remember where I first heard about this book. I don't know if I was scrolling Instagram and somebody may have posted it on their account or something. I had seen it at some point and kind of it was like in the back of my head. I didn't really know what it was about, but I remember seeing it and somebody was like raving about it. I think it was on Hoopla or it may have been Libby. Anyway, I didn't even look for it. It just kind of came up as a title that was available. I was like, okay. So I kind of read the synopsis of it and I thought, well, this kind of sounds interesting and probably a little bit heartbreaking and it's probably going to make me cry. I actually checked out the digital copy as well as the audiobook for it. So I kind of went back and forth. So I have mixed reviews on this book because I loved the writing. of it. I loved the character, like I loved all the characters, even the secondary characters. It was quite the cast. I loved what every character kind of brought to the story. Basically, you have this elderly couple, and from the wife's point of view, it is very much her thinking about the years that have gone by, thinking about the fact that her and her husband never had children, and you know, they're getting older in age and it is just the two of them. She's reminiscing on memories they've had and sort of like regrets, looking back on her life and their life together. Also the fact that in general, you know, she's never been much of a risk taker and she likes to sort of play things safe, and you know, she's just been content kind of doing minimal amount of day-to-day, you know, activities. To a certain extent, she's reached a point where she realizes that more of her life has passed than what is left, and it's kind of getting to her. And her husband, on the other hand, has always been very adventurous, wanting to try new things. You know, she talks about how like even as he ages, none of that has ever changed, and that he's always sort of trying to push her a little bit out of her comfort zone, but she's very much stuck in her ways. It tells you this on the back of the book, and it happens very early, like in the very, very beginning of the book. But he ends up passing away suddenly, and this leads to this chain of events of her reevaluating her life and if she is truly happy and if she is making the most of the time that has passed and the time that she has left. She finds this letter that or this note that he has left behind, and she decides, you know, this is like a sign that I need to do more with my life and not just be content with where I'm at, waiting to die. In the process, she makes these friends. It's very much found family. She's kind of embarking on this new path in her life. The premise of the story and the storyline was great. Instantly I was hooked and I was tearing up within a couple of chapters, and I was very much attached. As new characters got introduced, they just all felt very real. I was very much attached, and the writing was great. It was, you know, it was a little bit humorous here and there. And then about a little bit past the halfway mark, it all started to go downhill. And this is my personal opinion. I mean, I have, ever since I've read it on Goodreads, I have read other people's review, and it's split. You know, you have people who just loved it through and through from start to finish. And then there's also a lot of people who kind of felt like it was a little bit of a bait and switch. There was just a lot of things that happened in the last quarter of the book that seemed very much out of character for the main character, but also kind of came out of nowhere. And suddenly it felt, to me, it felt like this beautiful sort of marriage love story that they had been referring to and talking about and kind of revisiting, you know, their love story and how they met and everything like that, took away from that. She turned from this beloved main character into somebody that I was like, wow, you're kind of an awful person. I don't know, it wrapped up, but in a very self-serving kind of way for the main character. I just didn't like the turn that the story took, and it kind of spoiled it for me, honestly, because I felt like I was like invested in these characters and invested in this story, and then it just sort of switched and I didn't really care anymore, to be honest with you. So it was probably one of my most disappointing reads for sure. I mean, I may even say for the year, to be honest with you, just because I was enjoying it so much, and then it just went like, all right, and now we're at the last book that I read for December. I think I finished this like on Christmas Eve. It is the second installment of the series Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This one is Tales from the Cafe. And if you don't know about this series, it's a compilation of short stories. They all take place in this magical cafe. You can sit in a specific chair in this cafe at a specific table, and you can be brought back to the past or the future, but the stipulation is that you need to be back before your coffee gets cold. That's the amount of time that you have to revisit a certain time in your life. Usually there's about 4 stories per book. It follows different characters. Now, there is a little bit of a tie-in, like every story is an individual story, and yet some of the characters show up throughout the stories. So I do find, like, you could technically read this on its own because it explains the premise of what's going on pretty much at the start of every story, actually, which tends to get a little redundant. I mean, I understand why they do that, but at the same time, I feel like if you're already reading the book and you've read the one first story, you don't need to be, you don't need the rules of the cafe explained every single story. But anyway, you can technically read this one on its own if you want, but I feel like if you read the first book, it gives you a little bit of a background on some of the reoccurring characters that show up again. Each story usually has like a theme to it. The first one is called Best Friend, the second one is Mother and Son, the third is Lovers, and the fourth is Married Couple. And yeah, you basically just have these customers coming in and you kind of find out a little bit about them, and each one of them wants to either go to the past or the future. You kind of, as the story goes on, you find out why and what they are trying to do. They can't do anything to like change anything that has happened. They can interact though with people. They just can't do anything to change what has already happened. And I think like any short story collection, you're gonna have hits and misses, or not so much hits and misses, but some stories that you connect with a little bit more than others. That's what I find. In general, I really enjoy this series. In each of the books, I find there's always a couple of stories that hit me a little bit more. There's definitely tears shed at least once. I really, really love this. It's such a short read. Stories are great. I think there is 2 more books in this series that I definitely plan on eventually reading, probably sometime in the new year. So those are all the books that I read for December. If you guys enjoyed, let me know down below if you have read any of the books that I talked about and what you thought, what some of your ratings were. You could also just let me know what a couple of your favorite books that you read from December were. I would love it so much if you're new, if you'd subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Take care, guys.